Hi everyone, I'm Vinod and welcome to Career Bolt. This is the third video of the series on IIT Toppers I'm working on. So today I'm going to be talking about the IIT JEE Toppers from 1991 to 2000, and we'll look at each one of their stories in a lot more detail and see if there is any lessons we can learn from their careers. And I think this is specifically valid for students who are thinking about higher studies, because you can see that a lot of these toppers have gone in for higher studies, and you can kind of get a feel of what careers made the most sense for them. Okay, so let's begin with the first topper in this list. 1991 was Rina Panigrahy. So Rina did his BTech in computer science at 1991 to 1995 and went on to do his master's from MIT in computer science. Very interesting, because after his master's, he actually worked for a long time. So he worked in Cisco from 1998 till 2004, where he did his also computer science PhD from Stanford University. So after working in Cisco, doing a PhD, I think he finished his PhD and also finished his work in Cisco at the same time, and then went on to work at Microsoft Research and currently works as a research scientist at Google. Most interesting thing, Rina did his PhD in 2 years, but I think most probably he should have been doing some combined research along with Cisco. Cisco does have a lot of tie-ups with Stanford University, so he was into a research-based collaboration project where he probably did a lot in the workplace and used that workplace research to get his PhD. So if he did get his PhD in 2 years, that is absolutely miraculous. 1992 was Anil Kumar Ruia. Anil again went to IIT Bombay. So just like this person you have earlier, Rina, you can see that in the 1990s, unlike the 1980s when IIT Kanpur used to rule the roost, in the 1990s, people began to go to IIT Bombay in addition to other IITs. So the little bit of a trend reversal. I think part of it is to do with the fact that people from the Maharashtra region tended to join IIT Bombay, and many of the toppers were from that region. But again, speaks to an interesting trend about how people choose IITs. So Anil goes on to IIT Bombay, does his undergrad in 1996 in computer science, goes out to Princeton University. So there's a very high chance that Anil went to do his PhD from Princeton University. And within 2 years, I don't know what happened. Maybe he decided that was not for him. Maybe there was some issue with the qualifier exams, but he decided to drop from the Princeton computer science program. So you can see that after that, interestingly, Anil goes to Rutgers and does a master's in computer science. I find that very, very interesting. So something happens in the PhD program, either decides not to do it or drops out or is not interested, and then says, no, I want to do a master's in computer science, and goes on to Rutgers. So an important thing you learn from this example is that when you're doing a PhD, not everyone is guaranteed to finish the PhD program. A lot of people also drop out, and that's common, very common in the US. Anil has worked in Microsoft since then, so he's right now a principal engineering manager. Another interesting case study is Satya Nadella. Satya Nadella joined as an entry levels. He finished undergrad in 1988 and went to University of Wisconsin Milwaukee for doing his master's. And in the 90s, Satya joined Microsoft. So Satya is right now the CEO of Microsoft. And a person like Anil is working as a principal engineering manager. So again, different people can have different career trajectories based on their skills, their aptitude, what they're interested in. So it doesn't matter what your background is, as long as you can show the right skills in the workplace, you can either grow on to be a CEO, or you can be pretty comfortable as an engineering manager and say, that's enough for me. I do not want to keep growing up the career ladder. So each one chooses their own career path. 1993, Prasoon Kumar. So Prasoon's very interesting because he has an undergrad in computer science from IIT Kanpur. So again, after 2 years of people going to IIT Bombay, Prasoon chooses IIT Kanpur. He doesn't really go on to do his further studies, but you can see that he has actually worked in lots of jobs. So this is something I'm going to show where when I looked at his LinkedIn profile, Prasoon worked on probably around 17 odd jobs, and I was totally surprised. But right now, Prasoon works in Bangalore in Wipro as a data architect. Before that, he used to work in Visa in Bangalore as a systems architect. Before that, as an engineering manager at Capillary. Technologies in Bangalore. Before that, you used to work in MongoDB in India, Just Dial in India, Avaya in Pune, and I'll go through the list. He worked in Guru.com in Delhi, Live Career in Delhi, MarketRx, a well-known consulting firm in Delhi, software architect in Delhi, Lime Brokerage in New York. So Prasoon did work for a couple of years in the US from the year 1997 to 2002, around 5 odd years. When he was in the US, he worked in the San Francisco Bay Area. He worked in companies like Autodesk, eGain, EFI, Lime Brokerage, and then decided to come back to India. So again, a very interesting person who has worked in the US but decided no, India is a career for them, and decided to work in multiple companies in India, and seems like he's had a really good career. So I do appreciate those folks who ultimately do come back to India and work, and I think that's awesome for the Indian economy. 1994, Kamesh. Kamesh is again an undergrad in computer science. He finishes in 1998, goes on to Stanford University, does his PhD in computer science in 5 odd years. And pretty much since then, he has been a postdoc, and then he has worked in Duke University. He was assistant professor, got promoted to associate professor. Then he's a professor of computer science, a full professor right now. So Professor Kamesh is one of the toppers. He's at Duke University. He did spend a little bit of time, less than a year, working in Twitter in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that speaks about what you gain from academia. There's a lot of flexibility in US academia that you can take sabbaticals, you can spend some time in industry. And if you look carefully, you'll see that Kamesh took a sabbatical in 2012, well after he finished his tenure clock and became associate professor. So tenure clock means that you really have to publish a lot of research articles in your first 5 6 years, and if you successfully do a lot of publications, only then can you become associate professor, only then can you enter a tenure track. And the so-called advantage of a tenure track is that you cannot get dismissed on your job. So that's what really attracts people, and you can do whatever research you want. So that's the advantage of the tenure track. And you can see that as soon as he became a tenure track professor and associate professor, he then decides that, okay, let's spend some time on a sabbatical, and that's what Kamesh does. Okay, let's move on. 1995, Subhash Ajit Khot. Like Kamesh in 1994, Subhash chooses a career in academic computer science. So Subhash basically is currently a professor in computer science at New York University, and you can see that he went to IIT Bombay, and that's partly because he was a Marathi medium student. That's listed in his Wikipedia page. So belonged to Maharashtra, went to IIT Bombay, and right after that, he goes on to Princeton University to do his doctorate in computer science. And guess what? His supervisor was Sanjeev Arora. So if you watched my earlier video, you'd have seen that Sanjeev Arora was one of the toppers from IITs, but he went on to do his undergrad from the US. Um, Even though he topped the IIT, he didn't really study at IITs. He basically, I think, studied maybe for 1 year, transferred to the US, did his undergrad from there. And he's a professor at Princeton. So Subhash works under Sanjeev Arora. Both are toppers, and he's a superstar in the space of computer science. So he finishes PhD, and currently he's a professor at New York University, and he has been awarded lots of very top-notch awards, like the Rolf Neville Prize, which is equivalent to the Nobel Prize in the field of mathematics, the MacArthur Fellowship, again top-notch geniuses in their field. So very famous person. He has made lots of astonishing achievements in the past, and I'm sure he's going to continue to do so in the future. 1996 is Prasanna Ganesan. So Prasanna is a very interesting person because he went to IIT Madras, did his undergrad in computer science in the year 2000. I actually had a cousin of Prasanna be my classmate when I studied in Chennai, and I remember hearing that Prasanna was a topper in the IIT exam. Like almost every exam he wrote after his 12th exam, he was a topper. He was a topper of the Roorkee exam, and he also was a top-ranked student in terms of getting the President of India gold medal when he finished his IIT Bombay, IIT Madras undergrad. So Prasanna goes on, does his PhD from Stanford University. So it looks like if you're a topper in computer science, and if you're rank 1 in the JEE exam, there's always a place waiting for you at Stanford University, going by what you've seen from other examples. So Prasanna really does not go into academia. He works in industry for a couple of years. He works in a company called Voodoo, who is a CTO and general manager. That company got acquired with Walmart, and I think he made quite some money that way. He worked in the Bay Area, Santa Clara, for some time. And then he worked in a company called Clip, and right now he works in a company called Machinify. And this company, Machinify, if you look carefully, they've raised around $12 million of funding so far. And it's been Prasanna leading the show as the founder and CEO of Machinify for the past 7.5 to 8 years. So Prasanna chooses not to really get into the space of academics, but decides to pursue a career in industry. And again, seems to be doing a great job there. Arvind Saraf, 1997 topper, finishes his undergrad in computer science from IIT, I think it's IIT Kanpur. And super interesting because he goes on, I believe, to do his PhD in MIT in computer science, but I think he doesn't end up finishing it. He decides to drop and come back to India. I think that's where he is. He decides to come back to India and he does some really interesting stuff. So he worked as a software engineer in Google for a couple of years, for 3 odd years, then started a company called Swasth India. It's a non-profit organization working in healthcare. Did that for some time, worked in a family business called Triveni Saris for a couple of years, was the CEO of a company called Wishbook Info Services. So he has kind of dabbled in the space of nonprofit entrepreneurship for a couple of years. For some reason, decided none of it is worth it. And from the year 2000, he has been in a pretty traditional role in a company called Drushti, where he joined as the head of applications engineering, is currently the head, became the head of engineering, and now is a VP for engineering. So Arvind Saraf, topper, he is in India working here, not in the US, dropped out after a PhD program, either because he did not want to pursue a MIT PhD program, or maybe he understood that MIT PhD program is not for him. So I know an example of a person who went to MIT, the PhD program in computer science, and it took him 10 odd years to finish it. And he currently works in a company called Rubrik in the Bay Area. So again, just because you go to MIT doesn't mean that everyone will finish their PhDs in maybe 5-6 years. Some people may take much longer. So it all depends on individuals. MIT, I think getting out of MIT is very difficult. So you should be exemplary to even get your degree within the standard 5-6 years. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck there for a long time. And for some reason, you could even decide that that's not the place for you. 1998, Abhinav Kumar. Very interesting person where he was a topper from IIT, but he decides not to go to IIT. He goes to MIT, does his undergrad in 2002, goes on to Harvard in the same region, the Boston Cambridge region. He goes on Harvard, does his PhD. So he does his PhD in mathematics. Very interesting because the undergrad is in math, physics, computer science, and does his PhD in mathematics. And you can see that he worked as a professor in math at MIT for a couple of years. So he began life as assistant professor. Uh, Again, I tried to dig up some information. There was some rumors. I have no idea how correct they are, that there some issues with him getting tenure, and he decided to leave MIT. And then he works in a company called Renaissance Technologies currently in the private sector. So Abhinav is a person who does a PhD from one of the best schools in the world. Again, Harvard, not very good for engineering, but it's good for the basic sciences, definitely. So he actually goes on to be in academia, but again, not everyone in academia becomes a superstar. People also go back to the private sector. So Abhinav goes back to the private sector, works there. And I think even I think 1 or 2 years back, he did like a year of sabbatical. He's currently also working in Stony Brook University, State University of New York, as a visiting research scholar. And I think he did come back to India on a Infosys fellowship to work on a sabbatical for a year. So that's Abhinav. Uh, Again, there's no guarantees in US academia. You can have the most stellar of degrees, but if for some reason you're not cut out for it, you can always go back to the private sector. 1999, Vineet Goyal. So Vineet is an associate professor in industrial engineering at Columbia University. So he has a PhD in actually the business school. He's one of those few interesting characters who decide not to do a PhD in engineering, but actually to do it in business. So he does it in PhD in the Tepper School of Business, which is the business school of Carnegie Mellon University, and he does it in operations research. So he has an undergrad in computer science. Now, the funny thing about operations research is that operations research is where computer science and mechanical engineering intersect. So a lot of mechanical engineers also go on to do their PhDs in operations research, and people with a computer science degree, because of the optimization part of it, also go on to do their PhD in operations research. So Vineet is right now an associate professor. Looks like he got tenure, and he has been in Columbia for the past 12 years. But again, interesting thing is that unlike some of the other people you've seen in the past, Vineet actually goes to IIT Delhi, and I think it's probably because he was somewhere close to Delhi in terms of where he grew up. Year 2000, again, we see Nitin Gupta. So Nitin does his undergrad in computer science from IIT Kanpur in the year 2004 and goes to University of California, San Diego to do his PhD in bioinformatics. I remember reading an article long back. I'm not even sure if I remember it properly, but for some reason he was not that interested in computer science and he wanted to do something different. And he thought that bioinformatics is probably the space for him. So he does his PhD, did his postdoc there in UCSD, and then he basically goes on to the National Institutes of Health, does a postdoc for almost 4 years. By the way, postdocs are not well-paid positions, but in the US, what happens is that unless you do a postdoc for at least three to 4 years, you're not really in the right position to apply for academic jobs. So there are umpteen people who spend many years working as postdoc positions right after your PhD, so that they can get into academia as an assistant professor. And the trick is that if you have great publications during your PhD program, then I think a small percent of people, a very small fraction, around maybe 10-20%, do get a direct job posting as an assistant professor. But most people do not get professor jobs that way. They actually have to spend many years in a working as a postdoc. I've seen people working for 5 years, 10 years, and so on. So you've got to work as a postdoc. You do a lot of research publications, very low paid jobs, but the focus is completely on research. And only people are genuinely interested in a academic position, an assistant professor position, would do a postdoc because it's just not worth the time and the incomes they make, the paltry incomes they make. So the more time you spend as a postdoc is also a sign of commitment that if you're willing to spend a big chunk of your life doing a postdoc at almost making almost nothing, it means that you're really cut out for a life in academia because you're willing to make those hard choices and sacrifice for creating for yourself a career in academia. And again, I'm not saying this is applicable to Nitin, but Nitin comes back to IIT Kanpur and he's working as associate professor. That's awesome. Again, like I said, we need more and more people to come back to India and work in India, work with the next generation of students, and go on to be training the next set of scholars and toppers from India. So hats off to Nitin for doing this. Okay, so I come to the end of my video. So if you have any questions, do let me know in the comments below. And if you want to be in touch with me, look at the description below. Do subscribe to my channel because I want my videos to be pushed to your YouTube feed, and that can only happen if you subscribe and press the bell icon. So please go forward doing it. So folks, pleasure talking to you. If you have other topics, let me know. I'm more than happy to talk about this, but the next couple of videos will be about IIT toppers and some of the interesting topics I have in mind. Cheers, and thanks for listening to me. Bye.